I remember that night vividly. It was late October, the air crisp and biting, and I was walking back to my apartment after a late shift at the diner. The streets were mostly empty, with the occasional flicker of a street lamp casting long shadows on the cracked pavement. I took this route every night, but tonight felt different, heavier somehow. As I turned down a side street, I noticed a man leaning against a lamppost. He was dressed in a dark hoodie, his features obscured by shadows. I tried to ignore him and quickened my pace, but I could feel his gaze piercing through me. Glancing back, I saw he had shifted, now standing straight and watching me intently. "Hey, where are you headed?" he called out, his voice low and gravelly. "Just home," I replied, aiming for nonchalance but feeling a tremor in my voice. "Mind if I walk with you?" he asked, stepping closer. I shook my head, heart racing. "No, I'm fine." He laughed, a harsh sound that made my skin crawl. "You sure? It's a dangerous night to be alone. You never know who's out here." I picked up my pace, wishing I had taken the longer route. I could hear his footsteps echoing behind me. Each time I glanced back, he was closer, his expression unreadable. I decided to take my phone out, pretending to check a message, hoping to appear busy. "Come on," he urged, his tone darkening. "I just want to talk. What's your name?" I didn't respond, focusing on my phone as if it could provide an escape. I felt I needed to get away from him. Something about him felt sinister. Suddenly he lunged forward, grabbing my arm. "Don't be like that. You're being rude." Panic surged through me. Instinct kicked in, and I yanked my arm free, sprinting down the street, heart pounding. I could hear him shouting behind me, his footsteps gaining. I turned a corner and spotted a convenience store up ahead, its flickering neon lights like a beacon of hope. I dashed toward it, bursting through the door and nearly knocking over a display of snacks. The bell above jingled, alerting the cashier, an older man with a bushy beard. "Call 911!" I shouted, breathless and terrified. The old man's eyes widened at the panic on my face. I turned back to the door, heart racing. A moment later, the man from outside appeared, his expression twisted in anger. "Let her go!" the cashier yelled, stepping between us. "You need to leave!" The man's expression shifted, calculating. "I don't want any trouble, man. Just wanted to talk to her." "Get out," the cashier said firmly, his voice steady. I could see his hands trembling slightly, but he stood his ground. The man hesitated, eyes darting between me and the cashier. Finally, he backed off, but menace lurked beneath his facade. "You think you're safe in there? You'll regret this," he sneered before walking away. My legs felt like jelly as I sank to the floor, my back pressed against the cool, tiled wall of the store. The cashier called 911, and I could hear sirens in the distance, but all I could think about was the close call. When the officers arrived, I recounted the events, relief mingling with lingering dread. They assured me they would patrol the area, but I knew I would never feel safe walking home again. I wasn't physically harmed, but the trauma of that encounter followed me like a shadow, creeping into my thoughts at night. The world I had once thought safe suddenly felt like a minefield. So, to the man in the hoodie, let's not meet again. I still remember the chill creeping up my spine as I stepped out of the late shift at the diner. It was around 1 a.m., a time when the streets were mostly empty, save for the occasional car or distant siren. I liked the quiet, but that night felt different, heavier, as if the air was charged with something unsettling. I usually walked home, it was only a mile, and I enjoyed the solitude. As I turned down the street lined with flickering street lamps, I thought about how exhausted I was, dreaming of my bed. I was halfway home, just passing under a dim light, when I noticed him, leaning against a brick wall, his eyes fixed on me. At first, I tried to brush it off. Maybe he was waiting for someone. But as I approached, I felt his gaze intensifying. The way he shifted, a predatory tilt of his head sent a wave of dread through me. He wore a dark hoodie pulled tightly around his face. I quickened my pace, and so did he, pushing off the wall like a cat ready to pounce. "Hey," he called out, and my heart raced, the sound echoing through the empty street. I didn't respond, just kept my head down, trying to act as if I hadn't heard him. Bad move. "Where you going?" he asked, his voice dripping with casual menace. I could hear the smirk under it. I glanced back and noticed his cold, calculating blue eyes. "Just heading home," I replied, forcing calm into my voice, but the tremor in my hands betrayed me. "Home? It's late for someone like you to be out alone," he said, stepping closer. I could see the outline of something in his pocket. My mind raced with the possibilities. "Yeah, well, I'm fine," I muttered, trying to sound tougher than I felt. My instincts screamed at me to run, but I was frozen in place, paralyzed by fear. "Are you?" he said, a smile creeping across his face that made my stomach churn. "You wouldn't want to run into trouble, would you?" In that moment, I knew I had to get away. I turned on my heel and began to walk briskly in the opposite direction. I could hear his footsteps following behind me, an unnerving rhythm that matched the frantic beat of my heart. Each step felt like an eternity. The distance to safety stretched out like a cruel joke. "Hey, wait!" he shouted, and I could hear him pick up speed. "I just want to talk!" Panic rose in my throat. My phone was in my pocket, but I didn't want to stop. I glanced around, searching for help. A nearby convenience store still had its lights on. "Just a little farther," I muttered under my breath, urging myself to keep moving. I could almost see the store ahead, a beacon of safety. As I reached the door, I glanced back. He was closer now, his face twisted into a predatory grin. I burst through the door, the bell jingling loudly behind me. The clerk looked up, startled, and I rushed to the register. "Call the police," I gasped, pointing back towards the door. "Who?" the clerk began, but I didn't wait for him to finish. I turned to face the entrance just as the stranger stepped inside, his eyes scanning the room until they landed on me. "See? I told you I just wanted to talk." His voice sickeningly smooth, but there was nothing casual about his movements, coiled like a spring ready to burst. "He's after me," I shouted, desperation and fear in my voice. The clerk seemed to understand, grabbing the phone and dialing. The stranger took a step toward me, and I felt adrenaline surge through my veins. I was ready to bolt to the back of the store, but the clerk stepped in between us, a protective barrier. "Sir, you need to leave," he warned, his voice steady but eyes wide with fear. The man hesitated, scanning the faces in the store, and something dark flickered in his expression. "Fine," he said after a tense moment, his voice now a low hiss, "but this isn't over." He backed away slowly, but I could still feel the weight of his gaze on me as he turned to leave. I collapsed against the counter, breathless and shaking. The clerk was on the phone, his voice urgent. When the police arrived, the man was long gone, leaving only the unsettling memory of his eyes and that wicked smile. They took my statement, but the reality settled in my chest like a lead anchor. I made it home that night, but it took hours for the adrenaline to fade. I still check my rearview mirror and avoid empty streets after dark. The fear lingers, an unwelcome companion. So to the man in the hoodie who thought it was okay to stalk a stranger, let's not meet again. It was a chilly October evening, just after dusk, when I decided to take a walk around my new neighborhood in Ohio. I had moved in a few weeks prior and felt the urge to explore. The streets were lined with leaf-strewn sidewalks, and the air carried that crisp scent of fall. A little exercise seemed necessary after a week spent unpacking boxes and organizing my home. As I strolled along, I noticed the streets were unusually quiet. Most houses were dark, and only a few cars passed by. I had just reached a small park when I spotted a figure sitting alone on a bench. He appeared to be in his late 30s, wearing a worn-out hoodie and jeans that had seen better days. His scruffy beard and darting eyes made me feel uneasy. I brushed off my discomfort as paranoia. After all, it was a public place. I walked past him, keeping my gaze straight ahead. But as I did, I heard him mumble, "Nice night for a walk, isn't it?" I forced a smile and nodded, quickening my pace. "Yeah, it is." He stood up and stepped toward me, hands deep in his pockets. "You're new around here, right? Don't see many people out this late." My stomach dropped. "I just moved here, just getting to know the area," I replied, trying to sound calm. He sized me up, his gaze lingering too long. "You should be careful. This neighborhood can be a bit unpredictable." A chill ran down my spine. "I'll keep that in mind," I managed to say, attempting to keep my voice steady. He stepped closer, blocking my path. "It's dangerous for a girl like you to walk alone at night. People can be unkind." A knot formed in my gut. I glanced around for any other pedestrians or cars, but the street was deserted. "I really should get going," I whispered. "Why not? It's just us two now." "I promise I won't bite," he said, a smirk creeping onto his face that felt more menacing than playful. Adrenaline surged through me. I knew I had to get away. "I really need to go," I said firmly. He stepped back slightly, but I noticed him reaching into his pocket, and panic surged within me. I abruptly turned and ran down the sidewalk, my heart racing as I heard footsteps behind me. "Hey, wait!" he shouted, but I didn't look back. I sprinted past darkened houses, breath coming in ragged gasps. I could hear him gaining on me, and the thought of what might happen if I slowed down sent fresh waves of fear through me. I spotted a streetlight ahead and aimed for its glow, hoping it might offer safety. Just as I reached the light, I saw a car approaching. I waved my arms, desperate for help. The car slowed, and the driver, an older man with a concerned expression, rolled down his window. "Are you okay? Please, can you help me? There's someone following me." Without hesitation, he gestured for me to get in. I leapt into the passenger seat, heart pounding. The driver glanced back at the dark street as I slammed the door. "Where is he?" he asked, looking worried. "I don't know. Please just go!" I was shaking, trying to catch my breath. The driver stepped on the gas, and we sped away, leaving the park and the man behind. I turned to see if he was following us, but darkness swallowed everything. "Thank you," I whispered, still feeling adrenaline coursing through me. The man nodded, keeping his eyes on the road. "You should really be careful walking alone at night. It's not safe out here." Relief washed over me, mingled with unsettling dread. The encounter replayed in my mind like a horror movie, and I realized how close I had come to a far worse situation. I got out at my apartment, shaken but grateful. As I locked the door behind me, I caught a glimpse of the street through my window. The chill of uncertainty lingered, casting a shadow I couldn't shake. Let's not meet again. It was a chilly Wednesday evening in October, around 8 p.m., when I decided to take a walk to clear my head. I had just finished a stressful week at work, and the air felt crisp and refreshing as I strolled through the almost deserted streets of my small Pennsylvania town. Leaves crunched beneath my feet, and the faint smell of wood smoke lingered in the air, oddly comforting. I was heading toward the park, a place I frequented in childhood. A trip down memory lane might help me unwind. As I walked, I noticed the streetlights flickering to life, casting long shadows that danced eerily along the pavement. My phone buzzed with a message from my coworkers, filled with light-hearted banter about weekend plans. I smiled, momentarily at ease. But as I approached the park entrance, I spotted a figure under the flickering streetlight. He was tall, wearing a dark hoodie that obscured much of his face, fidgeting with something in his hands. My stomach twisted at the sight. For a moment I considered turning back, but the thought of letting my imagination scare me pushed me forward. As I got closer, I saw him staring directly at me, a blank, intense gaze that made my heart race. I tried to keep my expression neutral, but I felt a bead of sweat trickle down my back despite the cool air. "Hey there," he called out, his voice low and gravelly. "What's your name?" I hesitated. "No, just taking a walk." "What's your name?" He stepped closer, and I felt an instinctual urge to back away, but I forced myself to hold my ground. It's Sarah. I really should—" "Sarah," he interrupted, a strange smile creeping across his face. "Nice name. You come here often?" "No, not really. Just thought I'd check it out." I glanced around for anyone nearby, but the park was deserted. The unsettling feeling in my gut grew stronger. "Mind if I walk with you?" he asked, taking another step forward. "Actually, I'd prefer to be alone." I tried to sound firm, though my voice trembled slightly. "Come on, don't be like that. It's not safe to walk alone at night." I felt the weight of his gaze on me, and I knew I needed to leave. "I really should go," I said, turning to walk away. "Yeah, you should," he said, his voice dropping an octave. "You don't know who's out here." I quickened my pace, my heart pounding. I could hear him following me, footsteps echoing behind me. Panic surged through me. I glanced over my shoulder and saw him closing the distance. "Hey, wait up!" he called, sensing the threat in his voice. I rounded a corner and ducked into an alleyway, praying it would lead to a busier street. The alley was dark and littered, but I hoped it would shield me for a moment. I pressed my back against the cold brick wall, breath coming in quick, shallow gasps. I could hear him approaching, footsteps slowing as he reached the alley entrance. "Sarah, where'd you go?" His voice was eerily calm, as if this was a game. I needed a plan. My phone was in hand, but I didn't dare call anyone, not yet. I could hear distant traffic, a reminder that safety was just moments away if I found the courage to run. Suddenly, I heard him step into the alley, his silhouette barely illuminated by the streetlight. "You can't hide forever," he taunted, voice echoing off the walls. In that moment, adrenaline kicked in. I bolted from behind the wall and sprinted toward the street. I heard him shout something, but didn't stop to listen. I dashed into the busy road, heart racing as headlights approached. I waved my arms frantically, and a car screeched to a halt. The driver, a middle-aged man, looked at me with concern. "Get in," he shouted. Without thinking, I dove into the passenger seat and slammed the door shut. "Drive, please, just drive," I gasped, my voice shaky. The driver didn't hesitate, speeding away from the alley and the horror behind me. I looked back through the rear window, catching a glimpse of the figure standing at the alley's mouth, watching me disappear into the night. When we reached a safe distance, I finally caught my breath. "Thank you," I whispered, tears streaming down my cheeks. "Thank you so much." "Don't mention it," he replied, still focused on the road. "You okay?" I nodded, but I knew I wasn't really okay. The fear clung to me, a weight I couldn't shake. As I got out of the car and walked to my apartment, the shadows felt darker than ever. The memory of that night would haunt me, a reminder of how close I'd come to something terrible. I had just finished my shift at the cafe when I began walking home, the sun dipping below the horizon and casting long shadows across the empty streets. It was around 8 p.m., and I usually enjoyed this quiet time to clear my head after a long day, but tonight felt different. The air was heavy, and a chill crept in as the light faded. I took my usual route, a quiet street lined with trees, when I noticed a figure leaning against a lamppost ahead. He wore a dark hoodie, the hood pulled low over his face, and his hands shoved deep into his pockets. Something about him sent a shiver down my spine, but I tried to shake it off. I thought to keep my distance and avoid eye contact, but as I approached, he straightened up and began walking towards me. "Hey there," he said, his voice casual but edged. "You're out late." "Just heading home," I replied, trying to sound indifferent. I picked up my pace, hoping he would take the hint. "Mind if I walk with you?" he asked, matching my speed. "Actually, I prefer to walk alone," I said, forcing a smile. My heart raced as I glanced around. The street was deserted. "It's a quiet night." He chuckled, a low, unsettling sound. "Yeah, quiet nights can be lonely. I could keep you company." I quickened my pace even more, feeling panic swell in my chest. He matched me effortlessly, staying close. "You don't need to be scared," he said, his tone shifting into something more predatory. "I'm just a friendly guy." I shot a glance at him, and the darkness obscured most of his features, but I could see his eyes. They were intense, hungry. "Really, I'm fine. I'm almost home," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Almost home? Where's that?" he pressed, closing the distance between us. "I could walk you there." "No thanks. I don't need an escort," I said, my voice firm but trembling. He laughed again, and it sent a jolt of fear through me. "You're a tough one, but you know, not everyone is as nice as me on nights like this." I felt a knot tightening in my stomach. I wished I had taken a longer route or called a friend for a ride. I glanced at my phone. No signal. The streetlights flickered, adding to the eerie atmosphere. "I really should go," I said, my voice barely a whisper now. "Sure, go ahead. But you should know, I have friends not too far from here," he said, nodding toward the darkened alley nearby. "They'd be more than happy to meet you." Adrenaline surged through me and instinct kicked in. I turned sharply and sprinted down the street. I could hear his footsteps pounding behind me, gaining ground. "Hey, don't run! I just want to talk," he called out, but I didn't stop. My mind raced as I approached a busier street, the faint glow of lights from distant shops becoming a beacon of hope. I darted across the road, weaving between parked cars. I could hear him cursing behind me, but I pushed myself to move faster, the sound of my heart pounding in my ears. Finally, I spotted a group of people outside a bar, laughing and chatting. I sprinted towards them, my legs burning. "Help!" I shouted, stumbling into the crowd. "There's someone following me!" The group turned, their friendly faces morphing into expressions of concern. I glanced back, and to my horror, the man had stopped at the street corner, his posture tense, eyes locked on me. He muttered something under his breath before retreating into the shadows. I stood there, shaking, surrounded by strangers who were suddenly my lifeline. They asked me questions, but I could barely form sentences. All I could think was that I had narrowly escaped something terrifying. That night, I didn't sleep. Every noise made me jump, and the image of his eyes burned in my mind. Days later, I couldn't shake the unease. I changed my route and stayed alert, but the fear lingered like a shadow. I often found myself glancing over my shoulder, feeling that tight knot in my stomach whenever the sun dipped too low. Let's not meet again.